Welcome to Comparative Education for Leaders. As we spoke last time, in this class we explore global educational systems, policies, practices through a comparative lens. Let's begin. Today we'll be looking closely at a case study that I'll be sharing with you in a minute to explore and discuss how a challenge in one part of the world could be tackled by looking at it through comparatively from our perspective or from a different lens. But before we move on, it would be very interesting to see how many of us have actually been educated outside or in a different country than where we live in currently. I see 10 hands. Very interesting. Again, with a show of hands, how many of us have experienced a noticeable difference within the two educational systems? Very good, six people. So I do see two groups, the ones that actually have been educated in a different system but have not experienced noticeable differences, and the other group has noticed noticeable differences. And I belong to the ones that have experienced a noticeable difference. In my experience as a student, having been raised in East Africa and coming to the US, for college, I did notice the differences, not only at the educational level, but also different expectations and different ways of looking at education, definitely. And also as a teacher, teaching high school, both in the US and also in East Africa, very, very different approaches, especially in the classroom. Not so much the pedagogy, but the dynamics between student and teachers, very, very different. I want to hear about your experience. Let's take about a minute to share. Before reading the case study that's in front of you, let us take about 30 seconds to discuss with your partner to the left of you what you think the keyword that's actually we're going to be reading on really indicates. The word is learning poverty. And how do you think we measure learning poverty? You have 30 seconds. So exactly. So the two words, learning, poverty, when you put them together, it's indicative of that learning is not happening. There's some level of where it's not adding value. So in the case study that you just read, we learned that learning poverty in the context of Ethiopia is where late primary age children are not able to read age-appropriate or simple text by age 10. And we know that reading is very critical for learning. Reading proficiency levels is also an indicator in the US system, particularly, for example, in the state I was teaching in Florida, where there are a large population of the young population that for whom English is a second language, that has been one of the challenges for comprehension. So as you're thinking about what you read, think also about your some challenges that you have experienced in the reading proficiency area. So we can do the comparison as we think about the assignment we're going to be working on. So in this case, 90% of the children in Ethiopia are not able to read proficiently by age 10. Now let's talk about how do we measure learning poverty? How is it measured? So in this context, we read that 15% of the primary school age population in Ethiopia are out of school. What that means is that these are primary age students that have dropped out of school. And through a large-scale learning assessment, we also found out that 89% were not able to achieve the minimum proficiency level. So when you put these two groups together, it's indicating that there is a large population of the primary age children that are not able to read simple text by age 10. So in your assignment, I want you to keep that in mind. Think about the large population that are not able to read by age 10. Also consider maybe the state, the country you're in, and see how maybe the reading proficiency challenges have been addressed successfully, and do a comparison in terms of what practices or what policy changes have made a big difference. So that, in the country, if you're saying that it is doing a lot better in the reading proficiency level, what has worked? So keep that in mind as we look at this problem statement. So the statement is right in front of you. In low and medium income countries, more than half the children cannot read and understand a simple story by the end of primary schools. So do the comparison. You have the data in front of you about the Ethiopian context, and consider another example where you can do a comparison. So that you can actually answer some of these questions. How can it be effectively addressed? How can we tackle learning poverty? What solutions do you think are effective? You have about a week to work on this, and the analysis should not exceed 600 words. That is going to be due during the next class. Great, we've covered quite a bit. So today we looked at the 2020 Ethiopian Learning Poverty Brief critically and discussed its implication within the country's context. As our assignment, we're going to be applying a comparative lens. We're going to look at another data set and do a comparison. So I look forward to reading your paper. Thank you for an engaging class. So see you in the next class.